Hello, welcome back. It's a little bit cold out today, so I'm bundled up trying to stay warm. I don't have a ton of time to work on the car today, so I'm just going to do a few simple things. The first being my oil filter bypass adapter plate, which I will start with and show you what that is. And then I'm going to work on getting my alternator pulley switched out, and I'm going to press on a pulley for my power steering pump. Here's the oil filter bypass plate. The reason I'm putting this on is so I can install an oil cooler and have a little bit of additional cooling for my motor. It's going to install with this O-ring right where the oil filter normally installs, and this piece is going to slide through the middle there. The threads here will grab where they normally would on the oil pan, and then the oil filter screws right on here like it normally would. And then it has an out and an in where the oil normally goes into the oil filter here. It's going to rob it and take it here. It'll go through the oil cooler. It'll come back to the in here. Then it'll go into the oil filter here like it normally would. It'll get filtered and then return back to the motor. The thread pattern on this specific one is 13/16 by 16 threads. So there's a lot of different thread pitches out there for these, so make sure you get that one if you have an LS motor. And then the ins and outs here are threaded for AN-10 O-ring thread pattern. So right here you can see this side has the tapered edge, which will seal it, and no O-ring on this side. So the seal happens here. And then on this side it's flat and has an O-ring here which will seal onto this surface, and it'll leave me this side here where I can attach my AN-10 fittings. So all I'm going to do to install this is take a little bit of oil, wipe a tiny bit on each of these O-rings to install in here, a little bit on this, and that way when I screw all these things on, it's not going to grab on dry, high friction metal and possibly tear one of these O-rings. It'll allow it to slide and seat properly. So we'll get to it. Now that I've got that all installed, the last bit is just the oil filter. I bought a very inexpensive Fram just for the initial break-in of the motor, because the initial break-in is going to be with straight 30 weight petroleum oil, and it's only going to be for about 20 minutes or so, and this is going to catch the big gross pieces of metal, dust, and whatever may happen during the break-in period. And then after the break-in, I'll switch it out for a nice Bosch filter and put in my good oil. Next piece I'm working on is replacing the pulley on my alternator. The reason I'm doing that is because my harmonic balancer is an underdriven size pulley, and so that means that all of my other accessories would spin slower than they should if I ran them with our normal pulleys. So it actually came with a replacement pulley smaller than the one on here, so it will still spin at the correct speed and make the right amount of electricity. The way I was hoping to do it was use these fancy pants ratchet set that I have, where I could put this on there and there's still a hole through the middle where I could use one of my drive sockets to hold the center shaft and then loosen the nut. But the problem is I don't have a size big enough with my fancy pants ratchets. So what I'm going to do is what I've seen other people do on the internet, which is just use an impact socket on this nut and hold this pulley with your hand, and hopefully it's gonna work. Well, so much for my fancy pants idea. That worked great. Very easy. Now I'm just gonna reverse that operation to put the new one on. And I can see that I've collapsed the split washer in there. It still spins freely, everything looks good. So I'm done. Starting to rain a little bit. So as I said about the harmonic balancer being underdriven, that means that my power steering pump would also not be producing as much pressure at idle as it is designed to. And at standstill, when your tires aren't rolling, is where I'm gonna need the most pressure pumping out of this thing. So I actually got a power steering pump pulley that has the same offset, the same belt, I guess rib pattern, and it has a slightly smaller diameter than the stock ones. And it is a Dorman part. It's Dorman 300-202. Another thing I like about it is that it's all metal, and it's not made out of composite, so I'm not gonna be worried about it blowing up at higher PMs, or these fins that contain the belt on the sides fracturing and breaking off. So to install it, I just went to the hardware store. Uh-oh, I lost a nut. Went to the hardware store and I bought a long bolt, a couple fender washers, and a nut. And I'm gonna use this as my install tool for the power steering pump. The way I'm gonna do it is I thread this nut, get the two fender washers. They're gonna go on here, and I got two just so they slide on each other a little bit and prevent a little bit of friction. And these are press on. This is threaded inside of here, but it's only for the install tool. It's not for a nut or a bolt or anything to hold that on there. So I'm just gonna start it on there, and I'm gonna thread this in as far as I can. So now that I've bottomed that out, I'm gonna hold this with one wrench, and I'm gonna tighten this down with the other, and I'm gonna keep going until it presses this onto the shaft. So I'm finding that if I try to just use the wrenches alone, that I tighten this and the whole pulley and shaft spins, and all it ends up doing is backing out the tool I'm using to install. So what I'm doing is I'm holding this wrench with my knee, tightening the nut with the second wrench, and then just preventing the pulley from spinning with my left hand. Okay, that is very tight. And it's flush with the shaft, and now I just got to pull the tool out.